trailblazer with many firsts to her credit. Naina Lal Kidwai has been a rockstar banker, a leader who spearheaded change. She retired as chairman HSBC India and executive director on the board of HSBC Asia Pacific. And no, that's not stopped her. She's the founder and chair of the India Sanitation Coalition. She's the past president of FICCI and chairs the Water Mission. She's an advisor to top businesses and organizations. She's also the author of 3 books. And today, I'm thrilled to have her with me as the recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award 2021 under the aegis of ET Prime's Women Leadership Awards. Naina Lal Kidwai, many, many congratulations, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for the honor. Thank you for having me with you today. And I am indeed extremely grateful to a jury that chose to bestow this honor on me.
I want to start with the India Sanitation Coalition, of which you are chair. Is there any particular reason why you wanted to focus your energies and actions in this particular space? And is there a goal in mind for the collective?
Well, through my time at HSBC, I had begun to be quite engaged in HSBC's global programs, which started with climate and then evolved into water. And through my learnings there and being at international forums, this issue of sanitation in India was always coming up as something which India needed to do something about, and it was shame, and the standards were so pathetic. And I would hang my head in shame and want to go and hide as this often the only Indian in the room. So I knew that this was an area that needed attention, and I was looking out for what I wanted to really spearhead in the not-for-profit area when I retired from HSBC. And with discussions with others, my husband and I then founded the India Sanitation Coalition, which, as luck would have it, 6 months later, became a huge area for the country through the Swachh Bharat mission. So while I believed we would have had to do a lot of pushing at the government level and with policy, in fact, became an open door. And the work that we've done is really to partner government, to ensure that corporates get on the program, to ensure that not-for-profits, corporates, government can all work together to create the right environment, both for-profit companies and for the not-for-profit sector to take the sanitation agenda of the country forward. So it's been a very rewarding journey and one which I have no regrets about. It was just luck that we picked the right space to be in.
You use that word, push, and I read something in one of the books where you're quoted as saying, women don't push hard enough for their rightful place. Men do that all the time. Very often, push catalyzes change as well. And the earliest examples of that push that I could glean was when you wanted to intern with PwC and they said they don't consider women, but you still pushed. So is that the key to chipping away, battering down the walls?
I think if there is a direction one sees for oneself, it's worth the push. Now, I think as women and the social structures, ambition was somehow always treated as a bad word, particularly if it came from women. I think the social structures were such that we were always trained to be more retreating. And I think it is therefore even more important for us as women to push, even when it goes against the grain, to and in the direction that we choose to believe is important. And this isn't about fighting for it. You can do it quietly. It isn't about competing with the person beside you. It is often about competing against yourself and bettering yourself, but not losing sight and direction. And sometimes I do believe we see false glass ceilings. You think that there's something there, which actually when you bump up against it, you find it isn't there at all. And it wasn't as difficult as you thought it might be. So I do think it is important that we push ourselves to make ourselves stronger, better, but also push in the direction that we see as being important for us. And I repeat, not fight, but push.
You've had tremendous success, but I'm sure it could not have come easy. So we had a winner with us, and she's the first woman director of a refinery. And she said that her name is Shukla Mistry. And she said that I had to work 5 times harder than my male colleagues to get to the same place as them. In your career, did you feel discriminated against because you were a woman? And I'm sure, as with most women, you must have faced a full glare of scrutiny.
You are so right. I think particularly for those of us who were coming into the workforce in the 80s, we were a bit of an anomaly. And I was always very conscious of the fact that if I failed, it was going to be looked at very, very closely. And in fact, I often felt like a goldfish in a glass bowl, as if all eyes were on me, which I think does put a lot of pressure on one. For people like a director of a refinery, which is really an all-male bastion even today, I can totally sympathize with that comment. And yes, I did believe that we had to be better than our male counterparts to be noticed and get a step ahead. I'd like to believe that's changed. Sadly, I don't think it's changed completely, but I do believe it is somewhat easier that women get recognized for what they are. We don't always have to prove ourselves as being better, but to the extent that it pushes us to be better and better ourselves, yes, that's great. But the right environment for us to work in has to be one where we are recognized for what we are, not that we have to be pushing to be recognized.
You've been on the boards of several companies and you still are. So what are the challenges you feel women face there?
I think the biggest challenge has really been for getting women on boards. I mean, I heard nonsensical reasons like, oh, she's never been on a board before. And I'm like, well, every guy ends up on the board for a first time. So how come it's not a reason for getting a guy on a board? So can we please give this a try? So we have actually, unfortunately, thanks to the regulation, and it was a pity that it came to that, but thanks to the SEBI regulation that required one woman on a board, we saw women come on board. And now with the guideline that the board members should be independent and move to 2 board members, I think we have finally arrived in terms of board representation. It's not easy being the only woman on a board. I think many of the women who are there have, of course, been in work environments where they're used to standing up and standing out as being the only woman, but it's still never easy. And I think if that cohort grows and we can get the true representation, which across the world is looking north of 1/3, it would certainly help the cause. Otherwise, I think for the women who come on the board, they're really used to being thoughtful, making sure that the skill set that you have is showcased, listening and participating. And these are things which anyone who has arrived has done it through the course of their career. So it is not difficult for women to deliver. But joining a board where the environment is right, where you're not just there because someone's had to tick the box that you're a woman, but has picked you because of the skill set that you bring, is, I think, important, because that engagement and the way what you say is heeded is, I think, very, very critical.
In your journey, did you have any women or any mentors at all? I read that you called your father your guru, and you said there were many people who inspired you. I think one of the anecdotes was of a woman who came to office leaving her kids at her neighbors. This was, I think, during the riots in Mumbai.
You've obviously done your research, but and you're right. I have believed that people who have held up as role models, as mentors, can often come from very ordinary places. And you mentioned my executive assistant. And when I thought about it, I was like, I don't think I would have had the courage to come across Bombay from Bandra right down to what was Flora Fountain, where our head office was, leaving a young child in the hands of a neighbor, because I believe that was my call of duty. When the message that had gone out was no one was to take any risks or attempt to come into office, but if you could, it was welcome. And there she was. And my first reaction was like anger, you shouldn't have done this. But I was so grateful that she was there. And when I think, is this what I would have done? it made me again look at what was my commitment to work. And if she can do it, why would I not do the same? I mean, I was there because I was her senior. I came with my running shoes in case I didn't have to get transport back, etc. And so there were risks, even though I lived closer. So these are the role models to look for. That one individual who shows kindness to someone in need, that becomes a role model for what you want to be. So I think all around us in life, we find people whose values we like and values we don't. We have bosses who we've loved and bosses we hate. From each you learn what you want to be and don't want to be. And I have a long list of role models who, in the course of my career, have shaped it in terms of what I am today. And I'm so grateful to them, sometimes for the helping hand they gave, but often for what they stood for, and I could learn from them. And yes, the father, very important. I was very struck in my book, 30 Women, Their Vision and Their Voices, Their Stories, because of them, the large number talked about the influence of their fathers on their career. So all of us who were lucky enough to have fathers who engaged, encouraged us, sometimes in whose footsteps we could follow in terms of the same careers that they were in, often in careers that were different, but they were our guide. We are so fortunate. And my message out there to all the men is, please make sure that you are fully engaged in the way your daughters grow up and the way they look at their careers and their lives. That influence is inevitably the one that will lead to the success of your daughter.
That's really well said. As someone who also has been deeply inspired, by my own dad, I echo everything you said. I want to move to the slide of women from the workforce. This is despite our country's economic progress, increasing levels of education and higher education of women. But the absence of it in our national discourse, how concerning is this to you, and how do we remedy this situation?
So, it's worrying. It's worrying because our statistics show that our percentages are amongst the lowest in the world. And I think this is possibly because it cuts across all strata. I do believe we are seeing some success in the urban environment. We are seeing young women from tier 3, tier 4 towns opting for roles, sometimes in the big cities, and parents permitting them to actually take on those roles. So there is, I think, progress in terms of an urban workforce, which is enabling women to come in. But if we cut across all strata, I do think that there are issues. And if you look at, say, someone who works as a domestic worker, her fallback is only her family in terms of her children. And that family's social structure is such where her husband and the male guys, even if they are not working, they're likely to be sitting around a tea shop or even worse, drinking. But they're not stepping in to do the domestic duties that are required. So and I would see this with some of the wonderful workers at Seva, that the woman will get up in the morning, make the food for this unemployed, useless husband, and then leave for to work as a mason, working with her hands all day, or work in the fields, growing maybe organic cumin seed, and then come back to do the same ritual of cooking and taking care of the family. So she has prepared the meals for the day. She is the one who is worrying about her child, who may even be with her on the construction site. And she is the one who goes back tired after a whole day's work to do that same ritual she started with in the morning. I mean, it's inhuman. And it is this, until we have childcare, until we have social structures which make all members of the family pitch in and recognize the worth of that woman in terms of what she does for the family, economically and otherwise, we will be where we are, where women will come into the workforce because they have to be a second earner in the family. But indeed, they're not going to be healthy, they're not going to be well, they're not going to be able to stay in the workplace, and they are likely to be the ones who are knocked out of the workforce because of absenteeism and the inability to have progressed, etc. So it's a vicious cycle. And I think the only way it changes is if the social structure in the nation begins to recognize that women can work, women must work, but in order to do it, the family has to support them all the way. And social structures that come up might be very helpful, whether they're creches or the school systems which enable children to stay in school longer so the women can step out to work. I think there's another area, and I see that in the way, the areas I work in, water and sanitation, is if we make the life of that woman easier, that she doesn't have to, travel, as is still the case, sometimes 2 to 3 kilometers to go get water for the family. And why should she be the one who's doing it? But yes, she is the one who's bringing water back to the house. And she's the one that doesn't have to go into the fields to do her thing in the mornings and evenings. That life for her is easier. She's able to get through the daily ablutions much faster. And that spares up a lot of time for her to get on with doing other things.
And on top of it, there's been COVID, which has hit women the hardest. In some ways, though, COVID has provided opportunities. What are some of the things, maybe 2 or 3 positive and negative, that you think could be a pivot for women in India?
Yeah. So, COVID to me was, I thought, a boon for women initially. And seeing the statistics and understanding the issues now, I'm not surprised that it hasn't turned out quite that way for everyone. Why a boon? I think of when I had, when I was CEO at HSBC, brought in flexi hours, and it was all with a view to diversity. In fact, I'd set up these task forces of mixed groups, but largely women, to tell us what we could do to make the diversity and inclusion work that we were doing at HSBC better. And these were some of the suggestions that came, flexi hours, being able to allow people to take longer leave and sabbaticals was all part of it. And of course, one of the interesting ones that I brought in was a 5-day week, which I think other banks just saw as going to be a disaster and an experiment by some stupid CEO. The good news is that every other bank then followed it. I mean, we stayed open 6 days in the week, as in the branches, but head office shut for 5 days, and the branches did a roster, so everybody worked 5 days. But I use this as an example because these were things of change which I hoped would bring in the diversity that we wanted in the workplace. And it certainly helped. We had more women applying, more women staying with us, and at least till we were the ones that were different, till everyone else followed that norm. And therefore, the fact that suddenly, technology was always an issue. Now everybody perforce, and somehow the banks and companies, everyone found a way for everyone to work from home, was going to be this leapfrog into the direction I had seen had worked for us. But what I had obviously not fully recognized was the pressures on a woman as she's working at home, kids at home, having to prepare meals for the family, being again the home carer and the home looking after that was required across sometimes generations. So the women who were working from home found that their responsibilities at home grew and their responsibilities at work stayed the same or increased, because I think many of us went into overdrive once it became easy to access people on the net. And as a result, I think all the studies are showing that the hours of work that women have put in over COVID are far higher than what they have done otherwise, work as in home duties and work. So we have seen women just say, I can't do it. I'm going to drop out of the workplace. This is just too much of a balancing act. My kids' schooling is important. I have to be part of it. So it's back to really raising where's the rest of the family. Why the studies are showing that the men and their time at home also went up, as in home duties, but not proportionately as much as the women. So why was that more shared? Wasn't this an opportunity for the family to come together? So it's really back to who are these guys How do they see their partners and their place at home? Who are these mother-in-laws and parents? How do they support the girls that are out there working? And why isn't parenting more of a joint thing? Why do the PTAs have more mothers than mothers and fathers or fathers? And why can we not laud the fathers who take those duties seriously? So we should have awards for good fathers and what they've done. Learn more about that. And, maybe someday we will be like the Scandinavian countries where the guys are there pushing the prams in the park.
Amen to that. I hope that happens for us in India. Naina Lal Kidwai, many, many congratulations once again. Thank you for everything that you do, and we wish you greater success.
Thank you. Thank you for all the support, the goodwill, and the award. Truly grateful to all of you.